Good morning, everyone. Some more new faces, not new faces, old faces. It's nice to see you. This week we took a moment to remember the men and women who have fought for our country and the freedoms we enjoy. And may we never forget their sacrifice. But this thing got me thinking about other things we should take time to remember. I don't ever want to forget how far God has brought me. He's transformed my life from one of hurt, fear and brokenness to one of love, joy and peace. In 1 Corinthians chapter 6, Paul appears to be quite cross with the Corinthian church. And in verse 9, he says, "Do not be deceived, neither fornicators, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor homosexuals, nor sodomites, nor thieves, nor covetous, nor drunkards, nor revelers, nor extortioners will inherit the kingdom of God. And such were some of you." That last part hurts a little bit. But I'm so thankful that Paul didn't stop there. What he said next was, "But you were washed. You were sanctified, but you were justified in the name of the Lord Jesus and by the Spirit of our God." You've been washed. You've been cleansed. May we never forget that. When the enemy tells me I'm not worthy or I can never amount to anything, I can tell him he's a liar. When I sit in that place of condemnation, I might as well be saying that Jesus' death on the cross didn't cover all sin. Jesus paid the ultimate price for my sins. Once his blood has been applied to me in baptism, I am clean. May I never forget the price he paid for me. May I always remember how far he's brought me. I can't change my past, but I'm not bound by it. I'm not who I was. I'm not who the devil tells me I am. I'm a child of the King. I've been washed, sanctified, and justified. God bless you.
Praise the Lord. It's good to be in God's house this morning. I will take my mask off, but it's hard. I always get looks when I'm wearing the mask. I'm like, well, yeah, my hands are full. We serve a wonderful God who's here this morning, who cares about you, who's interested in me, who's spoken to us through the gifts. And this may seem strange, but obviously the church knows I'm used in interpretation, but when I'm preaching, I always feel a bit like, what if maybe my interpretation is my message, because that's what I'm thinking about. Maybe it's not from God. But when Mum and Sister Bull gave that, it was, yeah, that's right, I'm okay. Pastor preached last week, Hope Has a Name. And I really enjoyed that message. And Coffee preached recently that God is irreplaceable. Brother Hampton preached about the great search for God. And Sister Lolita spoke about when we hide from God. And from where I'm sitting, and maybe nobody else has caught it, but from where I'm sitting, there seems to be a bit of a theme in what God is saying to his church. And certainly in the gifts this morning and with the song Sister Levy picked, there's a theme here today. And my title is, Where's God When I'm Hurting? Jesus, we honour you this morning. We thank you that you're here with us. We're grateful that you've chosen to speak to us. You know each one that is here this morning. You know our hearts, our needs, our desires, our hopes. God, you see our hurts, our disappointments, our rejections, and the things that we have kept hold of instead of letting go to you. God, I pray that you would anoint my lips. Jesus, give me lips of clay to speak the word you have for your people. God, that I would be a vessel used by you this morning. God, I pray for an anointing upon the hearers. Lord, that their hearts and ears would be open to receive what you have for them. That we would be changed as a congregation, stepping forward into what you have for us, we pray. 160, 30-fold we ask in Jesus' name. Amen. Trials come to believers. Suffering is part of living, and suffering can take many forms. We can have physical pain, We can have emotional pain, waiting. Changing microphones. Waiting can be a form of suffering. We can have poverty and disability, and they can all be considered suffering. And suffering can result in negative emotions. We can experience grief, anger, sadness, disappointment, these negative emotions. But suffering does not mean God hates you. Suffering does not mean you're a sinner. And suffering does not mean you deserve it. Although we do put those things on ourselves. Suffering is an opportunity to experience the grace of God. And I want to talk about that today. Where's God when I'm hurting? In Genesis chapter 32, and we'll start at verse 24. Genesis chapter 32, it's the first book of your Bible. GEN, if you're looking it up electronically, has. Oh no, paper today. Okay. Genesis chapter 32, and we'll start at verse 24. Now, if you've done Bible study with Exploring God's Word with me, I find this story fascinating. Genesis chapter 32, and we'll start at 24. Then Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until the breaking of day. Now, when he saw that he did not prevail against him, now I'm using a New King James and it's capitalizing some H's, so to help us understand what's happening here. He touched the socket of his hip, and the socket of Jacob's hip was out of joint as he wrestled with him. And he said, "Let me go, for the day breaks." But he said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." So he said to him, "What is your name?" He said, "Jacob." And he said, "Your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have struggled with God and with men and have prevailed." Then Jacob asked, saying, "Tell me your name, I pray." And he said, "What is that you ask about my name?" And he blessed him there. So Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, for I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved. Just as he crossed over Penuel, the sun rose on him, and he limped on his hip. Now, I find this interesting. We have visitors at our home. Joel, I think you were the last visitor at my home. Did we wrestle as part of that greeting? Joel nodded. We didn't. We didn't. I just find that interesting that, "Hi, welcome to my fire. Now let's fight." It's just an interesting thing to happen. But Jacob knew that this wrestling had spiritual consequences. And he fought hard. And he held on to God hard. And God strikes him in the leg and shrinks his thigh muscle. Now, I've never pulled a hammy, but that would be painful. And God shrinks it. And Jacob still holds on. And Jacob says, God says, "You've got to let me go. Dawn's coming. I've got other places to be." And Jacob says, "I'm not letting you go until you bless me." Jacob is injured. He's probably in pain, and he's now got a short leg. But he's hanging on to God. Jacob demands a blessing, and God blesses him. Jacob's name is changed, like ours is at baptism. We go through the water and we're changed. Our name is changed at baptism. We put on the name of Jesus Christ. He's no longer, Jacob means deceiver. He's no longer a deceiver, but is instead Israel, a prince of God. God blesses him, and Jacob limps away. Jacob spends the rest of his life different, walking differently. God blessed Jacob, but God did not heal Jacob. And we sometimes go, "Well, where's my blessing?" And what we mean is, where's my whole situation made right? Why aren't I back like I was before this event occurred? But God is saying, I'm blessing you now. Go forward in my blessing, limp forward into your blessing. And we serve a God that can do anything. A God that can heal the leper, can lengthen bones, can heal bodies, he's healed my body. I know God can heal. We serve a God that can deliver, and I'm not saying God can't do those things. What I'm talking about is when God chooses not to, and we struggle. We struggle. Why can't it be how I want it to be? In Hebrews chapter 11, and what I'm trying to tell you is you may be blessed, and let God bless you today and in the future. Hebrews chapter 11 and verse 36. Hebrews 11:36. Still others had trials of mockings and scourgings, yes, and of chains and imprisonment. They were stoned, they were sawn in two, were tempted, were slain with the sword. They wandered about in sheepskins and goatskins, being destitute, afflicted, and tormented, of whom the world was not worthy. They wandered in deserts and in mountains, in dens and caves of the earth. And all these, having obtained a good testimony through faith, did not receive the promise. We as people, we look to see how others are blessed. How do we know they're blessed? And we look at this list and go, well, they weren't blessed. They were suffering. They were being stoned. That hurts. They were sawn in two. Now, I've not experienced that, but I'm sure that wasn't pleasant. And they wander. No direction. And sometimes we feel like that in our lives. Where is God leading me? Where am I going? What's my future? How does this look stepping forward? What do I do from here? But God says the world was not worthy of these people. They wandered knowing God was with them. They died knowing God was right there. They understood that God was supporting, ministering, helping in their situation. The Bible is full of stories of suffering, full of stories of pain, full of stories of loss, and of how people deal with that. And in 1 Samuel chapter 30, verse 6, we're only reading verse 6. If you keep going, it actually has a happy ending. But in 1 Samuel chapter 30 and verse 6, and the Bible says, now David was greatly distressed. David's upset. Now we think if I'm feeling distressed, it must mean I'm sinning. But distress doesn't mean that. Distress doesn't mean that you're a sinner. Distress means there's something wrong. And you're allowed to feel that emotion. For the people spoke of stoning him, because the soul of all the people was grieved, every man for his sons and his daughters. What's happened is David and his men have come back to their hometown, and raiders have been through and taken their wives and children. So David is upset because his wife and kids have gone, and his men are upset because their wives and kids have gone, and the men are talking of stoning David. But David strengthened himself in the Lord his God. David's men were understandably upset. Now, if I say to Lolly, hey, I'll be home in half an hour, and I'm 45 minutes, I often get a phone call. And it doesn't start with, beloved, sweetie pie, gorgeous one. What it starts with, where are you? I'm in the lobby waiting for the lift. But people get upset. You're not where you're expected to be. And these guys had lost their wives and children. That's more than just being late for dinner. That's a loss of family, So they're upset. Now there are 4, there's probably more, we have a counsellor that can answer all the questions, but there are 4 responses to emotional pain. We can shame. We respond to pain by shaming the other person. We blame. We choose to blame others. We control and manipulate others. Or we abandon into chaos, which means basically we flip a table, storm out, and let everybody else deal with the consequences because we're not here anymore. And at least 2 of these things were going on here. David's men were blaming him for the raiders that had come through. Now, I'm not sure what control David had over that situation, but they were blaming David. And then they were abandoning it into chaos because they were going to kill their leader that they'd followed for 6 or 7 years. They'd followed David, they'd supported David, they'd encouraged David, but now it was too much and they were ready to go. But David strengthened himself in the Lord. It is possible to grieve, be angry, feel hurt, and express disappointment without sinning. And when negative emotions are acknowledged to God, where's God when I'm hurting? When negative emotions are acknowledged to God, he can step in and meet the need. And choosing to hide your negative emotions, burying them, not letting people see them, has at times cost me the presence of God. Sin comes into my life because I'm hiding those negative emotions. As Pastor talked about, we do things to fill up that hole, and those things can lead us into sin. Not being honest with God meant I hid more and more and more of myself from him. And ultimately, I had to find a place of repentance and confess not only my sin, but also my pain. And when I did that, God could step in and minister, and God could heal my pain and resolve the sin question. Where's God when I'm hurting? That's the question this morning. In 2 Corinthians, I told you there's a lot of scripture about hurting. In 2 Corinthians chapter 11, and I want you to understand, God's with you. God is with you. In your hurt, in your pain, in your shame, in your guilt, in your condemnation, God is with you, wanting to minister, wanting to help, wanting to bless you. In 2 Corinthians chapter 11, and out of verse 3, are they ministers of Christ? I speak as a fool. I am more. This is Paul writing out a list of things that make him a great minister. In labours more abundant, in stripes above measure, in prisons more frequently, in deaths often. From the Jews 5 times I received 40 stripes minus 1. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was stoned. 3 times I was shipwrecked. A night and a day I have been in the deep. In journeys often. In perils of waters. In perils of robbers. In perils of my own countrymen. In perils of the Gentiles. In perils in the city. In perils in the wilderness. In perils in the sea. In perils amongst false brethren. In weariness and toil. In sleeplessness often. In hunger and thirst. In fastings often, in cold and nakedness. We really want this guy in church. Beside the other things, what comes upon me daily, my deep concern for all the churches. Paul knew what it was to suffer. Paul knew what it was to experience pain and grief and fear. Peril means I was in danger and concerned I could die. A lot was Paul's experience. And then the deep concern for all the churches is not comfortable. You know how you feel, your concern for your family, for your friends, for your loved ones. When someone is missing from church, you know how you feel. Oh, where was brother so-and-so today? I didn't see sister so, and you feel that concern. And Paul felt that for the churches. But in 2 Corinthians chapter 12 and verse 7, and this was part of the tongue and interpretation today. 2 Corinthians chapter 12, and we'll start at verse 7. And lest I should be exalted above measure by the abundance of the revelations. So Paul has suffered so much that God has revealed to him so much. A thorn in the flesh was given to me. What a blessing. We sometimes wonder, why am I in pain? But God is trying to accomplish something in your life. Where's God when I'm hurting? He's with you when you're hurting. A messenger of Satan to buffet me, lest I be exalted above measure. Concerning this thing, I pleaded with the Lord 3 times that it might depart from me. And he said to me, this was the tongue and interpretation, my grace is sufficient for you. And Sister Levy sang about grace over and over again. For my strength is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, most gladly, I will rather boast in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Therefore, I take pleasure in infirmities, in reproaches, in needs, in persecutions, in distresses, for Christ's sake. For when I am weak, then I am strong. Paul reframed the suffering that he experienced, and he brought God into it. He understood that God's grace, God's unmerited favor, God's hand and heart were with him in every trial. The suffering that Paul experienced allowed him to better minister to others, and it let God shine through him. Paul understood that while he's in a shipwreck, God is with him. That while he's hungry and thirsty, God is with him. While he's lying sleepless at night, deeply concerned for all the churches, God is with him. That while he's experiencing this thorn in the flesh and is pleading with God, please deliver me, God is with him. In our humanity, we sometimes think that if we're suffering, we're not blessed. God can't be close by. I'm experiencing this. How can God be somewhere near me? And so we try to find out who is blessed. And we do that by measuring people's income. How much do you get? Or clearly you're more blessed than I am. We measure house size. Oh, you've got a 2-bedroom home. Oh, you've got a 18-bedroom home with 14 bathrooms. Oh, you live in a share house with 40 other people and a single bathroom. And so we grade, you must be more blessed because you have more stuff. We base it on enjoyment. Who's smiling the most? Well, clearly they're the most blessed. Who's got the best job? Who has the most enjoyment out of their job? We look at smiles on social media, likes, thumbs up. All these things all assess how blessed we are. We look at clear skies or pretty flowers. That means we're blessed. But those are not actually measures of God's blessing. How many likes you get on Insta post? I'm looking at the young people. Thank you, Noku. Appreciate that. Yep. That doesn't define how blessed you are. Matthew chapter 5. Jesus reframed blessed. Where's God when I'm hurting? That's the question that we're trying to answer today. Matthew chapter 5 and verse 3. Blessed are the poor in spirit. We would say, well, how are they possibly blessed? But Jesus says, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn. Really? I'm sad and grieving and upset. I might even be blaming God for the pain that's going on here because I'm mourning. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek. Get out of my way. Okay. You're never first in the queue because you're meek. You're never first, always last. Someone else always has a greater need than you do. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. That's hard work. For they shall be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart. You watch the world try to destroy someone that is pure in heart. You tell someone you're a Christian and you watch them pick at you to watch you snap. Watch you tear down your testimony in just a few words, and they'll do it over and over. But blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, who everybody dislikes because they're compromisers, horrible people, peacemakers. And all they're trying to do is bring harmony, unity, help, bring brokenness back together. But everybody dislikes them. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when they revile and persecute you and say all kinds of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven. For so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. Where is God when I'm hurting? He's there with you, wanting to bless you, wanting to minister to you, wanting to touch you, wanting to help, wanting to hold, wanting to love. If you've lived any time at all, you've suffered. Even young people have experienced pain and suffering. But God is with you in that moment. When you're hurting, God is there. And it's okay, I want to tell you today, it's okay to say, God, I'm not happy. I know we come to church and we smile, hey, it's great to see you. And it is great to see you. And I'm happy you're here. And I smile because I'm happy to see you. But my face when I'm not looking at you is allowed to be sad because I might be hurting inside. And it's okay to say, God, I'm hurting. I'm in emotional pain. I'm in physical pain. I'm feeling like I can't do this or that. I'm feeling like I can't accomplish this. I'm feeling like I can't make it through. I'm feeling like I can't get there. But God is with you. God loves you. God wants to minister to you. God has spoken to us today through the worship, through the tongues and interpretation. God cares about you. God wants to walk with you as you go. God wants to minister to you as you go. Sister Fiona, if you'd come, please. 5 years ago, about 5 years ago, it's hard to keep track of time. You get older, you go, when did that happen? About 5 years ago, Lolly got sick. Hospital sick. And I remember one night we were visiting friends. We hadn't been to their place before. We were excited to be invited and we're hanging out, we're having a good time. And Lolly said, I'm not well. And we had to come home. I don't think we got to dessert. We were in the emergency room at Dandenong enough that I knew where the tea and coffee was, the good version, and where the spoons were hidden. Because hospitals, they hide spoons. I know. But I knew where the spoons were hidden. We were in emergency that often. We were expecting a miracle. Lolly and I have both been healed by God before. We were expecting a healing, a deliverance, but it never showed up. I was angry at God for not doing more. Why are we here again? I was disappointed in myself. Maybe I wasn't praying enough, fasting enough, giving enough, time, money, energy, whatever. Clearly I wasn't good enough. And I was worried about Lolly. Yet as time went on and nothing changed, we came to realise God was with us. we'd pray and God would show up. Healed, not healed, but God would show up. And his presence would surround us. And his arms would enfold us. And suddenly we'd know, hey, we're not here alone. His glory would come into wherever we were. We found peace. We found grace to help in time of need. And we think of grace, often we think of grace as Christians, we go, well, by grace I am saved through faith, not of myself. It is a gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. That's grace. But God's grace is more than just salvation. God's grace is I'm here for you right now, where you're at, in the hospital room, in the emergency ward, as people are screaming and crying and yelling and carrying on around. And Lolly and I'd pray, God would show up, and we'd find joy in those moments, and our laughter would spread across the room because God was with us. We didn't know what was happening or what would happen in the future, but we knew God did. Things were totally out of our control, completely out of our control, but not out of God's. We were in God's hand. And we discovered what it was to say, God, I don't understand, but I'm going to hold on to you. God, I'm hurting. And God would say, I know, and I'm here. Let's stand this morning. Somebody here this morning is hurting. Somebody here today is experiencing pain, emotional, physical, suffering. Somebody here doesn't understand, where's God right now? And I want to tell you, God is right where you're at. God is nearby. His presence is here. Jesus is here, walking these aisles, wanting to touch you. As most of you know, I'm studying and we discover all sorts of useful things, but the church you go into, how it's set up, defines what that church views as important. And you go into a Methodist or a Uniting church and the seats are all the way up to here and the word is high because they value the word. You go into a Catholic church and what's high is the communion table. That's what's high. And the preacher is actually off to the side somewhere. That's what's high. In a Pentecostal church, we have this big space here at the front. We call this the altar. Because Pentecostals want to experience God and we need space to do that in. So we have a big altar. If you're suffering today, I'm going to invite you. Jesus is here to touch you, to help, to bless, to show his love to you. I want to invite you to come and experience that nearness, experience God's grace. Let God work. Let God minister.